Please welcome Dr. Ravindra Shankar.
Respected dignitaries on the dais and friends, let me quickly come to the topic without wasting much time, because I know time is valuable for you also. I'll give you a brief overview of renewable energy law in India, which is now catching up very fast. We have listened to the speakers earlier in the morning and even now as to the technicalities involved in renewable energies and also certain issues related to distribution, generation, and so on. But what about the legal side? How does it fare from a legal point of view? What are the issues? Do we have a renewable energy law at all? So that's what we will just see now. So let me first take you through what is the recent developments in India as far as renewable energy is concerned. We have set a voluntary target of 25% reduction in energy emissions by 2020. This was announced by our earlier Prime Minister a couple of years ago as a part of the Climate Change Action Plan. So renewable energy is gaining a lot of importance because of climate change as well. The 12th plan, if you see, it actually looks at a low carbon inclusive growth. We've been talking about a low carbon inclusive growth where we want to reduce fossil fuel consumption and move towards something which is less carbon. We also are looking at reducing dependence on coal imports because the import of coal prices keeps fluctuating and then it's also pretty high at a certain point of time. And I think all of you know that there is a lot of subsidy that comes in for the coal-based fuel that we have. So if you really remove the subsidy, the cost of generating the conventional electricity will be quite high. I think it would be almost on par with renewable energies. So it would be imperative to have renewable energy which will be costing lower in the future than if you try to depend on coal imports, simply because coal is of course an exhaustible resource. The renewable energy share in the entire energy mix has been increasing. I think somebody has pointed out to those statistics earlier. Especially because of the renewable purchase obligations that we have. We also have energy efficiency schemes that Government of India has introduced, like PAT. PAT is Perform, Achieve, Trade, where somebody who is consuming, I'm talking about certain high designated consumers with huge energy consumptions. If they have consumed less, they can actually trade that certificates to those who have not been able to conserve that much. So that's the Perform, Achieve, Trade. The interesting thing with renewable energy power is that it's highly owned by the private sector. It's 86%. So government running renewable energy is very less, actually, if you look at it. It's the private sector that's been running the renewable energy, unlike in the conventional energy sectors where it was wholly run by the government. And that is why the need for renewable energy law arises, because there is more of a market mechanism that is in the play and government intervention is required. So need for renewable energy law is because there is a high startup costs, that they have spoken of now. To invest in a solar plant, in a wind plant is not very easy. It also costs a lot of money. You also have insufficiency in obtaining financing due to perceived risk. So normally if you go to a bank and say that I want to start a solar project, earlier it was not easy to get money because banks saw that it was quite risky to lend money for a solar project. So even now if I want to go and set up a solar rooftop, it's not going to be easy to convince the bank. The commercial viability is still a question. It's now getting a little more clearer. Currently, none of the renewable energy sources, if you see, are not under any law directly. There's no law. But the Electricity Act of 2003, I think all of you are familiar with the Electricity Act of 2003. That was like the big changer that took place in the entire legal regime of the electricity, where it brought about an integration of many of transmission, distribution, generation, etc., all under one act, and it made it oriented towards a more market-friendly act. So this Electricity Act forms the core even today for much of what the renewable energy decisions are taken, especially the regulatory electricity commissions which are there are guided by the Electricity Act. The renewable energy law, if you see, cannot be viewed just like another electricity law, because it is intended to aim at a gradual transition to sustainable energy. See, that's the larger picture. The larger picture is not just about producing electricity in a cheaper or in a different manner, but how sustainable is this energy over the longer period of time. So with traditional sources of energy getting exhaustible and more expensive, so is renewable energy going to be more sustainable in the long run? So what are the objectives of a renewable energy regulation? So basically there are three regulatory objectives broadly. This would apply even for renewable energy or your conventional energy. First is to secure sufficient and continuous supply of energy. See, that's very important for us right now, because you may have that we are connected to a large number of places through the grid and electricity, but are they getting sufficient and continuous supply of energy is the question mark, because many areas today we don't have more than 2-3 hours or 5 hours of electricity in our country. So that's very important. The second thing is to assure universal and affordable access to energy. See, that's the second point which the law should aim at, or law will aim at. How affordable are these sources of energy that we are going to provide? So if it is going to cost 12 rupees a unit, then obviously it's not very affordable. So we want to make this more affordable. And third is to align energy production and consumption with objectives of sustainability, environmental protection, and especially related to climate change. Because it is not, as I said, just merely producing energy from a renewable source, but also ensuring that it meets the environmental norms. It also is sustainable in the long run. So, Government of India is on the verge of bringing out an act called the Renewable Energy Act. But right now it is in the form of a bill called as the Renewable Energy Bill 2015. It was put up, I think, in June or July for public comments. And I don't know how many of you have actually seen this Renewable Energy Bill which is there. It's a very significant act where they are broadly, why it's so significant? Because when you look at the purpose of the act itself, it's very different. They say the purpose of the act is to provide this energy which is affordable, accessible, keeping in view the sustainability of energy in the long run. So that's what makes it very different. And they have classified the entire bill into, or the act, into institutional structure, supportive ecosystem, economic and financial framework, and renewable energy application. So it's a very well thought out act, I would say, and they have categorized it in this form. I'm just giving you a few highlights of this bill, and then I will come to the outcome of it. So some of the significant points in this bill are, they are going to set up a renewable energy corporation under the Companies Act, and this is going to be going to act as a renewable national level renewable energy procurement entity. So there's going to be some sort of a centralized procurement entity called the Renewable Energy Corporation. They also established broad principles for medium and long-term renewable energy targets as per specifications in the renewable energy policy under the Electricity Act. So now the renewable energy targets are still not very concrete in the present circumstances. So the Renewable Energy Act wants to make it more concrete. Then they want to move towards a more clearer market-based mechanisms, wherein they would like to sort of decontrol as much as possible as far as the prices are concerned. So maybe the consumers would need to pay a little more. Then include national targets for the next 5 years for development of renewable energy sources. So now they have come up with very clear targets. Earlier this targets was missing, now they want to have very clear targets for the next 5 years. So you have a designated entity to ensure adherence. See, this is also very important, because what type of standards do you want to put? Because somebody in the morning was also talking about the kind of technologies that we use, the standards that we set, how good are they, and how contextual are they in terms of our own country's requirement. So there is going to be a designated entity that will ensure adherence to notified standards as per the policy, and they will set up certain protocols for certification. So if anybody wanting to do this renewable energy business, there is going to be a certification and there will be a protocol mentioned, which was, I think, highly necessary, because most of our laws didn't have any sort of a protocol in the past. So this is something again very new. Of course, these are setting up dedicated and manufacturing facilities and zones. They will also identify the key technologies for here. One of the things we always lacked was which is a good technology. We always talk about best available technology, BAT, somebody mentioned. We also talk about best economically available technology, which is called BEAT, but we don't know, these have never been actually classified or really been promoted or put forward by any legal systems. So this time the Renewable Energy Act is going to focus on these technologies. They also are going to introduce something called as an informed local consent for projects in letter and spirit and a formal institutional structure for revenue sharing. Frankly, I am still not very clear what this formal institutional structure for revenue sharing is. Is it to share revenues with the local communities? Because one of the big issues is while we are using these common property resources of people, are we actually sharing the revenues with them? Because when you generate electricity from small hydro, when you are using the land for solar from farmers and so on, of course in Karnataka we are now trying to pay them. But so do you share, but will they get a part of the either the revenues or actually the electricity itself which you are going to generate? So this is also very important. And they are going to take consent so that it's not arbitrarily given. The CSR contribution now, the social responsibility of the corporates, whatever they contribute now is going to be to the state green fund. Actually, there's going to be something called state green fund, which the Act is going to introduce. So all such CSR contributions will be taken as CSR itself. So it will now come under that Act. So they also want to bring down this parity between renewable and non-renewable energies, which a lot has been talked about. So how will they do this? The main thing is the distribution. I think so there's going to be a lot of focus on decentralized distribution. Because unless you have decentralized distribution systems, you will not be able to bring down the costs. So that's another important thing. They also have made it very clear that no license will be needed to generate or supply renewable energy except for whatever is mentioned under the Electricity Act, which is a little more of procedural issues rather than granting a license. But then I personally feel that this would also amount to some amount of procedures. Then there is going to be for the first time a national uniform mandatory renewable energy purchase obligation trajectory. So far RPOs were the mandatory, what exactly, how much you have to purchase was not mandatory. Now it is going to be defined that how much you will have to purchase will also become mandatory. And all regulated obligated entities, who are these regulated obligated entities? The ESCOMs, what we have here, the electricity supply companies, as well as industries, the large consumers. They will develop a 5-year renewable electricity procurement plan. So how much they are going to procure now towards meeting the renewable energy targets. So this is sort of a summary of the Act. Outcome is, I would say, if this Act really comes into force from next year, which they plan, it is aimed at power for all through decentralized generation. You are going to have a lot more stringent RPO targets, which is renewable purchase obligation targets. This especially for DISCOMs and then the large industries. And compliance for DISCOMs is going to become mandatory now. So earlier the compliance itself was an issue. Now they're going to make long-term RPO compliance. You're going to have low-cost debt to reduce per unit. So now financing, they have come out with some more clearer financing guidelines so that you can actually borrow at a lesser rate, and that can reduce the per unit cost, because the only way that you can actually make electricity generation is also to enable the borrowings to become cheaper. And as I said, there's going to be a clean technology boost. And the deemed generation, this is something that the Act has come up with, the deemed generation. That means generators will be paid even if the power is not evacuated by the grid. Earlier, many of the generators started complaining, we generate, but then because the grid is not able to evacuate to take the power, we are losing. So they just generate and keep it, and they're not able to sort of give it to the grid and take the money. So now deemed generation is that you will have to purchase that. Once it is generated, means it is deemed to be sold. So this is a very, very industry friendly or a generator friendly clause that has come up. This is the outcome of the Act. Just to give you a comparison, Germany also has a renewable energy way back in 2000, and they have brought in 3 main principles of this. Investment protection through feed-in tariffs. You're all familiar with what feed-in tariffs are. So there, the operators get a 20-year guarantee payment for electricity generation. So this is makes them very, very secure. Second is, while they have given this, they also say no burden on government finances. So they have introduced something called as a remuneration rate. which is like a surcharge which is added to the consumer bill. So the consumer, more he consumes, the more he pays. There is also something called degression. Degression means actually decreasing. They will feed in tariffs. If you get, they will start decrease. They will provide for decreasing feed-in tariffs, so that this will exert some pressure on generators, and technology transfers will become more efficient. So this is what this degression is. So what the logic behind this German Act is, in the long run, the renewable energy is going to be cheaper, because if you start adding the external costs like environmental costs and social costs to the actual fossil fuel rates, it's going to be phenomenally high. So therefore you need, so renewable energy will not have those costs, and therefore it is likely to be cheaper. Now let me come to a few techno-legal issues. Now what I've shown you is okay, the legal part, the usual thing, but then are there, what kind of issues? Now in the past we have faced some issues, though may not be through a Renewable Energy Act or a law, but we had similar policies and initiatives wherein we got into certain techno-legal issues. Let's take the instance of Clean Development Mechanism, CDMs. All of you are familiar with what a Clean Development Mechanism is. Basically, it's a trading of the carbon emission reduction certificates, where it's done globally. See, for a CDM, and India, incidentally, after China, is the second largest number of projects of CDM in the world we have. So there are, but for a CDM project to be qualified, it has to have 3 or 4 criteria. One is technological barriers. That means the technology should be new. It should not be easily something that is already very well known technology. Financial unattractiveness. That means whatever, like my friend Venkatachalam has shown, it cannot be very financially. So if I say that solar rooftop is very financially attractive, then you don't get CDM qualified. And it has to have prior consideration, which means that that means it should not already have been in existence much before. It should be a fairly new idea with which you are starting. So these are the 3 conditions why CDM, for any project to be CDM qualified. Because the logic behind it is that if CDM, if a project is business as usual and financially viable, you don't need any support from CDM or by selling carbon credits. In the event that the project is not very attractive and unviable, then only it becomes eligible for CDM. Now, if you look at our own acts, we had the Energy Conservation Act way back in 2001 itself, and that act actually mandated for industries to go in for energy efficiency measures. If you look at section 14O of that act, it says direct any designated consumer who does not fulfill energy consumption norms to prepare a scheme keeping in view economic viability of the investment. So this is a law. This is the Energy Conservation Act very clearly saying that if you are a high consumer, you must take measures to reduce your consumption in an economically viable manner. Now this is something that is totally contradictory to what the CDM eligibility criteria is. So if somebody is approving projects under CDM, it is actually, and if the project is also taking suitable measures under the EC Act, then which of it is correct? So you see, so while law itself mandates for economically viable investment in energy projects, the CDM is therefore in a way impeding the effectiveness of the law by encouraging financially risky projects. So ultimately what happened is a lot of CDM projects were shown to be financially risky, were shown to be not very attractive because they wanted to get qualified for CDM. But in reality, if you examine, there are a number of case studies, they were actually very much part of what could have been met under the Energy Conservation Act. So this is one of the issue that is contrary to what CDM was and what our Act says. Then if you look, there is something called as the case of perverse incentives. What is this perverse incentives? I'll just, because I'm giving you an example only because of the lack of time. See, if you look at the production of HCFCs, which are ozone depleting substances called hydrochlorofluorocarbons. Now these HCFCs, are used in your refrigerators, air conditioners. They are basically like cooling agents. Now, as per the ozone depleting law or the Montreal Protocol, this gas is supposed to be phased out. Okay. Now the interesting part is when the HCFC during its production releases a byproduct called as HFC-23. Now this HFC-23 is one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Okay, it has a huge global warming potential. So therefore what the producers of HCFC-22 did very cleverly was, they said we will destroy HFC-23, which is a global warming gas, and claim our carbon credits because we are reducing the global warming potential by HFC-23. So now there is no regulation in India requiring the destruction of HFC-23 and there is no market sale for it, and therefore it became an attractive proposition for CDM because it was meeting all the criteria of CDM. Right? So whatever I said earlier. Now, and big industries, I will not name them, have actually made a couple of hundreds of crores by this destruction of HCFC. But what is the purpose incentive here? The purpose incentive here is that it has encouraged the production of the HCFC-22 gas, which is again being banned by Government of India. So on the one side, Government of India has actually said you must move and phase away 22 because it is a ozone depleting substance. But on the other side, the production is getting increased because they want to burn HFC-23. So therefore you see, this is what we call as perverse incentive. So you are providing an incentive, but it is also resulting in other things being affected, because both are bad for the environment, but then one policy or one law is helping the other. Okay. Now if you look at the carbon emission reduction tax, okay. Now in CDM there is a condition of additionality where we say. So therefore carbon credits, they say, are to be treated like incentives. So they say, see, you are making it financially unviable and unattractive, therefore you are giving it to us more like an incentive. So you cannot charge a tax on carbon credits, because the Delhi government, I think in 2011 or something like that, before that, they imposed, they said, these people are making money by selling carbon emissions, so why don't we tax them? So the industry came up and said, how can you tax, because CDM is being given as an incentive. So it is not taxable. The incentives are given to offset the additional cost and therefore should be treated as capital reserves free from any tax. So this is the argument the industry came up with. So what I am trying to bring here is the contradictions or in legal issues, what can be there. Then if you look at feed-in tariffs, see feed-in tariffs, all of you know what is a feed-in tariff now. I mean, I don't want to get into the technical explanation of that. See, it's playing a very, very important role in stimulating the needed investment for the renewable energy sector, because it is very attractive, to do a feed-in tariff, this one. Now, one of the important features of our feed-in tariff is local content or domestic content requirements. There is a term called local content or domestic content requirements. What is that local content or domestic content requirements? The policy or the law says it is mandatory for the investor to source a certain percentage of materials from local suppliers in order to be eligible to receive the benefits of the supply. So they say, while you may be importing, let's say for instance solar, you may import the panels or whatever from outside, the PV, but then you have a lot of other components that go into making the solar that you must actually get it done through a domestic content from your own local supply. So you can't import the whole equipment lock, stock and barrel, but you can import only that much which is not available locally. So this is a mandatory requirement they had put for feed-in tariffs. Now, what is the issue here? So therefore, in order to develop domestic manufacturing capacity across value chains, this was introduced under the JNNSM, that is the Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission. Now, United States came up with an objection here for the domestic content requirements for solar cells and modules. It said that it is not in consistency with Article 3 of the GATT and 2.1 of the TRIPS agreement. So both these essentially, without getting into details, are that there should be a proper, see these two clauses are for national treatment. National treatment means you cannot treat something that is imported as different from one which is already being done by the local industry. Then you are actually differentiating. So all countries are signatories to this national treatment clause. So United States said, now you are violating this clause because you are making it mandatory that you have to have local content only. Therefore, the importers are actually denied this kind of a facility to import. Well, so the issue, I'm not getting into the solutions of the issues, I'm just leaving the legal issues open for your own judgment and discuss. Some of them are getting resolved. Then there was another issue, whether renewable energy actually requires environmental impact assessments. Earlier, I think a couple of years before 2010, there was no requirement for any renewable energy project to undergo an environmental impact assessment. But then they got a notice saying that we must now do it because solar projects have been classified under category 8B. So, environmental impact assessment was revised in 2006. And under the 2006 notification, they have said that solar projects will now fall under areas which cover townships and development projects covering an area of less than 50 hectares. So therefore, they said you have to have environmental impact assessment. The Ministry of Renewable Energy said that no, they said whatever the land, we are only procuring a large amount of land, but the actual built-up area is less than what is actually designated there, and therefore under the Act. So therefore they said you cannot make it EIA mandatory for us because the actual built-up area is not causing any environmental damages. But the Pollution Control Board, the CPCB, said the environmental impact assessment is not so much for the built-up area as such, but it is to ensure that the entire land what you are occupying does not violate ecologically sensitive areas or coastal zone regulation acts or any sort of agricultural activities. So therefore they said we have to impose this thing. Okay, so let me give you towards one case law. This is Hindustan Zinc Limited, which you know is a very famous company, versus the Rajasthan Electricity Regulatory Corporation. See, I'll just summarize what this case law was. Actually, what happened was the Rajasthan Electricity imposed a certain surcharge on the Hindustan Zinc Limited for not having complied with the renewable purchase obligations. So they said which now they are making it mandatory under that. So the Hindustan Zinc Limited raised the following points. They said the Electricity Act of 2003 and the tariff policy of 2006, etc., have envisaged the promotion of captive generation. They were actually basically producing it for captive purposes. So this is, they said, for captive generation of electricity, which is now curtailed because of the RPO regulation. We are not able to produce that much, resulting in lower production by captive producers. The second argument they said was this captive power plants are exempted from licensing because I said there was no licensing now mandatory for captive power plants. They said the Electricity Commission of Rajasthan has no jurisdiction to impose such a surcharge in case of a shortfall in the renewable purchase obligations. Now RPO, they said, the third argument, can be imposed only on distribution licensees, which is as per section 86(1) of the EA Act. You cannot impose it on people, we are not licensees, we are not distribution licensees. So the Supreme Court order said, and this was very significant, it said, it upheld the Rajasthan Electricity Commission's order, the obligation to pay, and what the Supreme Court argued was that the objective of all energy laws is to promote electricity generation from renewable sources as against polluting sources. So this is the overall objective of the energy law. The Rajasthan Electricity Commission has been empowered to act in order to formulate regulations to promote renewable energy. So you cannot say that it is beyond the jurisdiction or anything like that because the Electricity Commission has the power to take adequate steps for promotion of renewable energy. And the surcharge imposed on Hindustan Zinc is not actually a tax, but it's only a penalty. This is the interpretation. They said what they have imposed on you is a penalty because you could not meet your RPO obligations. It is not a tax which was tried to be argued by HZL. And addressing the last point, it said the mere fact that no license is required under the for a captive power plant does not imply that it can't be subjected to regulatory jurisdiction. So he says you can't bring in that argument that just because you are a not a licensee, you cannot you are out of the jurisdiction of the law. So they upheld the order actually of the Rajasthan Electricity Commission. So this proved an important input, and the Renewable Energy Act now is actually bringing in much more clarity into these issues. Finally, suggestions. I think incentives must be inbuilt into the legal system, which I think in a way the Renewable Energy Act has already done it. But I am still wondering what exactly, it has not made any specifics about these incentives. So I think the new act must be more specific about what are the kind of incentives that it is going to give. And we must now move out of, phase out the capital subsidies, because capital subsidies are only, for instance, if you are giving a capital subsidy on solar, many people have acquired large tracts of land saying that we want to do solar power. I think about it. But many of them did not put it to use for many years. They just kept the land like that and hoping that one day they may sell off half the land if they don't actually materialize the project. So what you're doing is your capital incentives are actually resulting in creation of just assets, but they are not actually based on performance. Then I think it's good to review the consent of the Pollution Control Board with reference to the clean technologies. So every time you go and get a consent from the Pollution Control Board for renewal, for the consent to operate, the Pollution Control Board must not just review whether it's not polluting, but has it actually using the upgraded technologies. And I think there is finally a need for some kind of a deregulation of the existing law, and we have to move towards regulating more of markets, which I think we are doing right now, and the Renewable Energy Act actually is in a way bringing in this market mechanism, deregulating it more, and providing greater incentive for generators to put up the RE plants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Srinivas. And now Timken India Limited would be making a presentation. Mr. Halda.
Good afternoon. Respected Sri Jayanto Banerjee, Executive Director, West Bengal Power Development Corporation, Dr. C.K. Chanda, Sri Venkatachalam, Dr. Ravindra Srinivas, respected dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, industrial professionals, many of them are our esteemed customer, media friends and dear students. I know I am standing between you and the lunch, but I will take you through very fast as possible, yet giving you some insight about what Timken means, what Timken can deliver to your both running plants as well as the unconventional plants like wind, etc. And I'll explain you about the different product feature which can reduce the life cycle cost, improve the reliability, stability and security of your plant. Very quickly I will take you through the Timken profile. Then some power generating industry challenges and solutions and some case studies. Whenever we present from Timken side, we try to take you through our vision and the mission very quickly, just to give you an idea what Timken is. For the benefit of many of the students and many academicians, we are the global leader in bearings and mechanical power transmission, continually improving performance, reliability and efficiency. And our mission is we use our knowledge to make the world's industries work better. Our last year's sale was 3.1 billion. Out of that, it was almost 50% mobile and 45% was process. The quick product portfolio, we are into bearing, power transmission, related products and industrial services. We lay a lot of emphasis on the industrial services because we understand if we are able to help the customer, they will be benefited, and if they are benefited, then their equipment will be more reliable and running better. Your kind of industry features in the energy segment, I will talk both the conventional and unconventional kind of energy where our products go and help customer improve the performance. Globally, we are present in 28 countries, 61 manufacturing centers, 23 distribution centers, and 12 technology centers. One of the largest R&D centers is in Bangalore, which is the second largest in the Timken world. It's not just what we make, it's about what we know. So we firmly believe in that. And this being a technical session, we once again want to emphasize on this. And we being the expert from friction management and power transmission, we convert theory into practices through cutting edge capabilities and in-depth experience. These are the product portfolios quickly, starting from taper, cylindrical, spherical, precision ball bearing. Some time ago, steel was a part of the Timken company. Legally it is not, but it's a Timken steel. It is a kind of a Timken established company. So Timken was one of the first companies to start their own steel plant for the bearing. We have the gear, chain, pins, house units, seals, condition monitoring, on whole lot of services. I'll take you through the unconventional energy trend globally. If you see, the trend for the wind energy is almost growing at the rate of 10% per year. This is globally. Probably the Indian case, it will be more. This is just to give you an importance or emphasize that this is an upcoming energy and India has a lot of potential, having 3 areas, a large shoreline where a lot of abundant availability of the wind. We have wind solution like direct drive of 4.5 megawatt wind turbine drives, where our bearings are used, large bearings, huge bearings, 2 to 3 meter OD. So this is the latest trend in the wind segment. Here is the future. If you see the trend starting from 1980s, when a small 50 kilowatt turbine was just 15 meter. Now you can see 150 meter tall tower, only 10,000 kilowatt. So this is the kind of trend developed in last 25-30 years. These are the bearings in the drive and the generator, where Timken bearing goes into the wind sector, starting with the rotor, main drive, the pitch bearing, your drive, your bearing, and of course the generator. For the direct drive, there is, if you see, it's as I was mentioning, it's a very large bearing, pitch drive, pitch bearing, rotor bearing, and of course this is a more detailed explanation of the wind turbine direct drive. This is how the wind applications, wind turbine architecture is evolving, starting with a single stage, the multiple, then direct, and of course now it is a modular drive. This is a bearing in a 3-point main shaft contact. It can take both the radial and the thrust load. Because in the wind, it's a very challenging application. As many of you might be knowing, this requires for very high reliability, almost 15-20 years, because that's a very long turbine. The worst part is if something goes wrong in the bearing, taking out that bearing wheel itself will cost huge. Bringing a large tall crane, heavy duty crane itself is a challenging, and wind turbines are not located on a very accessible area, it's a very remotely located area. Coming back to the conventional side, because in West Bengal, a lot of power plants, they use the conventional product, conventional bearing and the related services. So I will just quickly take you through those where you can improve your reliability and performance of the plant through some of the products which I am going to talk about. I'm not sure, many of you might be knowing or maybe might not be knowing, Timken has set up a gear services plant in Raipur. And that plant is catering metal, cement and power. We are refurbishing the big gearboxes from this plant. Lot of our customers from power sector, they are taking the support of this plant in Raipur, and that plant is also capable of doing the bearing repair for large bearing repair. Some of these gearboxes, conventional power plant, thermal power plant, pulverizer, cooling tower, then these gearboxes have been shown, which we do regularly service from Raipur. We also manufacture the new gearbox. Some standard solution for pulverizer. We just given the short TRB, tapered roller bearing, spherical, cylindrical, gearboxes, air preheater, blowers, pumps, material handling. Everywhere Timken is present, and Timken is one of the leading supplier of the MRO products and the services for the power generating station. Let me take you through a little bit of problems you face. You will all agree and appreciate that one of the major problems is the debris contamination for a thermal power plant. We have a solution for that: inadequate lubrication, and it can give a kind of a damage which is called point surface origin, and then misalignment. For that we have solutions. We call it the Duraspex bearings, where the special profiling is done onto the bearing by giving a special profile, material finish, or the construction of material. So these three can be played around and give you a Duraspex kind of power rating series bearing, which can give a prolonged life to the power plant. And of course debris resistant bearing, which can work very well in the debris resistant debris environment, which is very common for power plant. These are some more expansion, pulverizer general rebuild. I will take you through some case studies which will emphasize what value we can add through this kind of services. And we have got the coating technology. Today morning when Mr. Shobhi Bhattacharya was talking about the spray technology, how it is, I was just thinking, it's a wow, what kind of technology it is. Probably this can revolutionize the things for the power generation segment. We do have a product with a good technology, with a coating for the, we call it engineered surface. Those can run maybe multiple times higher than the conventional bearing. We have the condition monitoring services and bearing repair services to help both conventional and unconventional power plants. Duraspex, as I said, super finishing, profiling, and ultra clean steel. These are the three specialties in this bearing, and this can give a much higher life, almost 50 to 100% higher life than the existing standard bearing. Super finish means it can really separate the two metal to metal surface through a special finish, which can give a better lambda ratio. Lambda ratio is nothing but how much two surfaces are better separated through the loop film. So this can help with the super finish operation. And inadequate lubrication or the boundary lubrication is sometimes very common in power plant kind of application. There this kind of bearing can do a much better performance. Profiling, this can avoid misalignment kind of damage by giving the profile at the edges of the bearing, and with this the stress distribution from edge stress, it becomes a very uniformly distributed stress profile, thereby improving the bearing life. This is the application. I'm going to take you through some case study. It's a pulverizer general application, and I would probably expect that some of you might be knowing, those who are irregularly using our bearings. Yeah. We take the old journals from the power plant. You can see the left hand side, this is the before repair and the after repair. This is pulverizer journal shaft. This is the housing, lower journal housing. This is the upper journal housing. We did the complete refurbishment along with the changing of the bearings. This was a scrap journal. We converted into almost like a new journal along with the supply of the bearings. We have been doing this. We have done with the State Electricity Board in Maharashtra. We have done with some of the Tata organization and many of the Reliance and many other organizations. And this could be an interesting proposition for improve your asset performance and reduce the life cycle cost. We do the bearing gearbox repair, as I mentioned. This is the facility of our Raipur plant. You may wonder why Timken is in the gear. We believe in bearing and the power transmission solution. So we have taken over a company called Philadelphia Gear, which is a 130 years old company. And this is very reputed. They are the founding member of AGMA. In 2011, we've taken over this company and transferred the technology to India in Raipur. These are the 4 services: on-site technical services, inspect, repair and upgrade. We can give you the OEM parts. We have the reverse engineering facility and we can give you a brand new gearbox. 3 years of warranty for the new gearbox. We have got, it's not 3, it's 4 million drawing globally available. Both gear and bearing engineering capability ensure that we can do a good job. Material means Timken Gear Services stand the test of time. World-class engineering support both globally and locally. The reverse engineering, we have a special facility, strong brand and of course state-of-art technology. So this photograph is a Hoffler grinder machine. It can do the grinding up to DIN class 1, 2. Those who are into the gear background, they will understand what DIN 1 and 2 means. For your industry, you require DIN 5 to 7, but this can go up to DIN 1 to DIN 2. How we do? Forging, to gear turning, to gear hobbing, grinding, checking, and the complete gearbox. We can replace the damaged component and we can give almost 18 months warranty even for the repaired gearbox. So these are some of the ways we intend to do to reduce the life cycle cost of both conventional and unconventional. Everywhere the gearboxes and the bearings are used, where we can improve the performance of the plant. Reliability, we have the condition monitoring services. We do all kind of conventional services along with the application analysis. So this is the Timken value proposition where we come into picture. I am taking a quote from Professor Chandra, was talking about the quality, electricity, reliability, stability, security, sustainability. All this can be achieved starting from bearing, condition monitoring, diagnostic, power transmission solution, application knowledge, training, certification, tools, and of course the repair services. With this, I thank you all for your patient hearing, and I take the opportunity to invite you to our stall put up by our channel partner, Mrs. Trade India. Goelji, you can take some of the customers and the academicians and respected gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen to our facility and to the stall. They can get to see some of this product which I have presented. Thank you. Thank you, Engineers Welfare Forum. Thank you, sir. It is an honor to share a dais with so many dignified, knowledgeable persons, and really thankful to the organizer for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We are going to break for lunch, which is going to be perforce a short break. And after lunch, we would request you all to come back in half an hour's time, if that is possible, so that we can start our next technical session. Thank you so much.